Many think that finding a lucrative job in America is a walk in the park. However, your perception will change after watching the end of this story. Finding a job is difficult anywhere in the world, and even more so if you don't have a roof over your head, as was the case with Paulo Maurice Young, the protagonist of the story we're about to tell you. As a Black American, Paulo Maurice Young's life in America was never easy. His family came to America fleeing the poverty of their country in the hope of finding a better life in the US and achieving the famous American dream. They soon realized that none of that would happen. When Paulo was born, his family was very poor and very large, an unsuitable combination if you want to survive in a largely racist country with few employment opportunities for immigrants. Although they tried hard, they never managed to achieve the life they went there for. They went hungry every day, lived in abandoned apartments in the poorest neighborhoods in the outskirts of New York, and their clothes were worn and dirty because they barely had clean water with which to wash themselves. It was a sad reality, but they still managed to get by. Paulo's family created their own lifestyle and continue to struggle every day to find a better destiny. Paulo grew up as a child with few resources, but at no time did he feel inferior to anyone because of it, because for him the most important thing was the family. My son, I want you to be clear about one thing and never forget it. Family is the greatest wealth a person can have. Yes, you are already the luckiest just because of that. Do you understand, honey? His mother would tell him every time she saw him cry because he couldn't have new toys or buy the clothes that other kids wore. I know, Mom, and I thank God every day for your love, but I promise you something too. I'll get a good job, one so good that we'll never have to live here and go hungry again. Paulo promised her when he was only 12 years old. He was a poor boy, but he had enough skills to become a brilliant student if life had allowed him to. Paulo was the first in his family to go to a public school and to learn to read and write. He was never able to study for a career, but he managed to acquire some basic skills with which to start looking for a better job that would allow him to lift his family out of poverty. In addition, although he did not tell his family, Paulo regularly went to the district's public library to read books on advanced education. He loved to learn, and above all, he read books on electronic studies and engineering. He learned something new every day by reading those books and memorized entire exercises, even though he knew he would never be able to put any of that knowledge into practice in real life. When he was 20 years old, Paulo fell madly in love with a girl from his neighborhood called Miranda. Neither of them had any money, but they loved each other very much, and when they had been dating for only 6 months, Miranda became pregnant, and they became the parents of a beautiful baby girl named Maria. However, after giving birth, Miranda suffered many complications and died in the ICU. The doctors could do nothing to save her, and Paulo became a single, destitute father to a crying baby who needed to be cared for. After burying Miranda, Paulo's life changed forever, and he knew what he had to do about it. He was the father of a child who had only him in the world, and he didn't want her to have the same life of misery he had had to live. Mom, I have to ask you something. I need you to take care of Maria while I'm gone. I'll come back every night to be with her, but during the day, I have to go look for work. I hope you understand. Paulo explained to his elderly mother 6 months after Miranda's death. You're my son, and I know you'll do what you need to do to take care of yours. I will take care of the child, while rocking the cradle of the child who had just fallen asleep. Paulo knew he would not have it easy. In fact, he spent weeks scouring the city in search of a decent job and got nothing. His appearance did not help him, as he could barely shower and his clothes were very worn, two things that all the interviewers took into account when hiring someone for their companies. For the next interviews, he tried to be more dressed up to make a better impression, and although at first it seemed that everything was going exactly the same, after several days of waiting, a major aerospace company gave him his first job opportunity. The company was called Pratt & Whitney and was one of the most prestigious in the world in its industry. Unfortunately for him, the job was very far from his home and he had to walk more than 6 hours a day, 3 hours each way to get to work. However, despite all the difficulties he faced, Paulo did not give up and not only managed to work full-time to earn a good salary, but he did so well that his superiors soon realized his potential. Paulo was exhausted but very happy. He had finally achieved his goal, to have a job and a salary with which to support his daughter and help his family. However, his happiness was short-lived. On a daily basis, he had to face the insults and leering of his coworkers. Paulo continued to work normally and was doing as well as ever until the problem of the insults reached the ears of the company's management. "Mr. Paulo Maurice Young, please come to the manager's office immediately," was what he was told when he was called on the company's PA system. Everyone listened and looked at him with intrigue. Paulo started to get nervous and his hands were sweating. It sounded like Paulo had gotten himself into serious trouble. He was intrigued to know why he was being called, although deep down he knew exactly what it was all about. However, he felt no fear and was ready to stand up to his boss to defend his rights and his worth as an employee, but none of that was going to be necessary because Paulo's luck was about to change forever. As he entered, he was met by a beautiful young woman who looked at him with kind eyes and greeted him with a nice smile. She certainly wasn't the kind of boss Paulo had imagined, and he hadn't expected such a pleasant welcome either. He sat down and introduced himself to her. "Good morning, ma'am. My name is Paulo." He couldn't finish the sentence. "I know perfectly well who you are, Mr. Maurice, and I want you to know my name is Kelly Johnson, and I'm the general manager of the IT division." Kelly extended her hand with a big smile and Paulo returned the gesture. "I can't tell you how glad I am to meet you and to know that you don't want to fire me," Paulo replied, breathing normally again and feeling much more relieved. "Of course not." Suddenly her gesture changed and she was not smiling. She had become very serious and was staring at Paulo. "I don't want to offend you, I really don't mean to, but your colleagues complained that you always smell bad, that it's uncomfortable to work next to you." She asked as tactfully as she could. She was uncomfortable about having to talk about it. He had been hearing for months how his colleagues talked about him behind his back and even pointed him out shamelessly. Therefore, when that nice young woman asked him in such a polite way, it did not bother him at all. On the contrary, he was relieved to see that there were still people with a shred of humanity capable of looking beyond people's outward appearances. "I'm very sorry you had to call me in on this subject, Miss Kelly, but believe me when I tell you that it's even more uncomfortable for me to have to explain to you the real reason why I look this sloppy," said Paulo in a very polite and calm manner at all times. "Of course, I can't wait to hear your whole story, Paulo. You have my undivided attention," she said as she settled into her chair and gave him the gift of her time. They talked for over an hour, and when Paulo finished telling her his whole story, Kelly couldn't hold back her tears. She was dumbfounded to learn the truth about her employee and what he had to do every day in order to get to his job and work at full capacity. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Maurice. You've truly left me speechless. After hearing your story, any complaints from your coworkers about your appearance seem so petty to me. And you know what? I'm not going to pay any attention to them. On the contrary, because from now on, you are going to stop working with them." Paulo looked at her in surprise and for a moment thought it was time to give up and say goodbye to the dream of having a good job. But what the woman was going to tell him next had nothing to do with a dismissal, but with a promotion that would completely change his whole life. "Relax. I'm not going to fire you. You can breathe. I meant that you're not going to work with them again because as of tomorrow, you will become the manager of the IT division. We're also going to offer you a scholarship so that you can train with us and increase your knowledge of engineering, which is already surprisingly advanced given your circumstances." Paulo was speechless. He didn't quite understand what was going on and could only stare at her with his mouth open. "And one last thing. Starting tomorrow, you and your family will be able to live in a company house. We will assign you the one of your choice, and you will never again have to come to work walking 6 hours a day or smelling of sweat." "That's over, Paulo. From today, your life is going to change forever. You deserve it. You have fought all your life to be someone better and to fulfill your dream of giving your family a good life. It is an honor for me to be able to tell you that your dream has just come true." And so it was, as Paulo Maurice Young went from living with his daughter and family in a dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city to living in a brand new 3-story house with a garden, a swimming pool, and his own garage. Paulo's life was never the same after that afternoon in Kelly Johnson's office. All the bad luck that had always been with him had disappeared, and better things kept happening to him. Paulo's work was so good and he proved to be so talented that in just 2 years, he became number 4 in the company and is now part of the management team. Today, Paulo has already bought his own house, a luxury car, and his daughter goes to the best school in town. In life, challenges can limit our achievements, but if you keep walking the right path and stay on track, your dreams will come true. Paulo's story is proof that perseverance is always rewarded and that good things always come in the end. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen.